This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. A lot of things happening, a lot of news. I'm going to have Caleb Moore on. He's the son of Chief Justice Roy Moore later on in the show in the third segment. I want you to listen carefully to what he has to say, because what happened in Alabama in 2017 with regard to how the Senate race, where Roy Moore was running against Doug Jones, the Democrat candidate, ultra-leftist, a really sleazy individual. I can't say that too many times. There was massive fraud there as well. And the past, unfortunately, has become a prologue. And talking about fraud, talking about stealing elections, talking about the criminal who is about to become president of the United States, unless the president, our current president, steps in, Donald Trump, invokes the Insurrection Act, declares martial law, and calls for new elections, which we've been advocating that he does, if he has widespread evidence of fraud, which he does, by the way. Clearly he does. The Supreme Court abdicated its responsibility, did it in a cowardly fashion. His own judges stabbed him in the back. But we'll get to that. Let's just talk about what's happening right now. You know, I wrote this book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. And the second title has become as important as the first. We are in a revolution. But forgetting the scandal industry is important because the American people have been deceived over and over and over again. Fox News, which is now discredited, along with Newsmax, which all of a sudden has become the pro-Trump network to try to capitalize on Fox News' demise. Everybody knows now that it's corrupt, that it's gone left, that it called the election early to stab the president in the back. Even Mike Lindell, the owner of MyPillow, says that Fox News is a traitor. I mean, this is a good Christian guy who doesn't make these kinds of allegations mildly. But Fox News is trying to rehabilitate itself by pushing this Hunter Biden story with regard to the Ukraine, China, and Russia. Now, this is a big story. It is. And it's worthy of prosecution. And you've got my word that shortly after the new year, Freedom Watch will commission a citizens grand jury, and we will seek and we will get the indictment of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Biden's brother, and everybody involved in this, as well as proceed by indicting Comey, McCabe, Clapper, Brennan, the Lovebirds, the Obamas, the Clintons, the whole lot of them. And that's one of the suggestions I make in my book. That's one of the proposals on how, short of a violent revolution, we can begin to wage a real revolution and return the rule of law and return respect for the Constitution and morality and ethics to our country. We'll have to do that. The federal judges won't do that. And I'll get into that. But let's talk about Fox News, because this is the way they're trying to get back their viewership by promoting this Hunter Biden story morning, noon, and night. And it's just not sincere. And people see through it. And then, of course, you've got Newsmax, which is owned by Christopher Ruddy, or at least he runs it now. I don't know who owns the shares of stock in the company. But Ruddy gave $1 million to the Clinton Foundation, now claims he's the Trump News Network. I can assure you that if and when Biden becomes president of the United States with that evil witch Kamala Harris, the pathological liar that she is, it's likely that he'll suck up to Biden and Harris as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he made contributions to their campaign as well. You know, Ruddy was my friend, and I thought he would support me when I ran for the Senate in 2003 and 2004. But instead, opportunistically, which is the way he does things, he supported Mel Martinez. And then Martinez, who didn't even want to be senator, later quit. He did it only because George W. Bush asked him to do it, and they thought that that would help get Cuban and Latino votes in the state of Florida. But this is what we're up against. It's not just a question of the endemic corruption, the fraud, the deceit, not just in the executive branch, not just in the legislative branch of government, but most particularly in the judicial branch of government, which is Thomas Jefferson predicted because they were unelected and thinking they were there for life. Of course, they're not really there for life, would become despots and tyrants. And he predicted that every 20 years or so, we would have to shed the blood of patriots and tyrants yet again. And he added, what's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty? Now, he didn't want to see violence, and I don't want to see violence. I've said this many times. I keep repeating it because I want it to sink in to the American people. My most important role right now, in addition to bringing citizens' grand juries and other hard-hitting cases, is to educate. And that's why I thank Radio America every day when I do my daily podcast, which you can also find at freedomwatchusa.org and on Freedom Watch YouTube, TV channel, because it was the founding fathers who used the printing press to coalesce the colonies and to get them to unite. And as Benjamin Franklin said, either we all hang together or separately we will hang. But we need to educate the American people. They need to know that they have no government. And they have currently no real spokesman in the media, in the mainstream media like Fox News or Newsmax or whatever, that have their interest totally at heart. Their interests are making money. Their interests are drawing viewers every single night like Hannity does. Major breaking story. This is going to happen. There's going to be justice. Bring on Joe diGenova. Bring on Tensing, diGenova's wife. Bring on Sarah Carter. Bring on Greg Jarrett. Bring them all on. And these people just lie continuously to the American people. We know that there is no justice. We know that there's no one that's going to hold anyone accountable at the high level. And that's why I wrote this book, It Takes a Revolution, because we, the American people, need to rise up. We, the American people, must save ourselves. There never was a political messiah. Even if President Trump had won, again, Biden will be the president and Kamala Harris, unless the president takes matters into his own hands and declares martial law and calls for a new election. It won't happen in the courts. We see that. His own judges threw him under the bus and threw the American people under the bus. It's every man for himself. It's every woman for himself. Preserve your standing in the Washington cesspool, otherwise known as the swamp. We're all part of a club. We continue to make money hand over fist. We have this power. And hey, who cares about the American people? As Louis XV and Marie Antoinette said in the days before the French Revolution, I'll say it in French, après moi le déluge, after me the flood, meaning I don't give an F what happens after I leave, because I've had my time. I've profited by it. Well, you know what happened to them? They went to the guillotines. And I say figuratively in a chapter of my book, It Takes a Revolution. Not actually. I don't want to see anybody hurt. I don't want to see violence. I want a peaceful and legal revolution. But the subtitle of that chapter on the federal judiciary is First to the Guillotines, because that's the attitude. And I got to tell you, after all my years of being a lawyer, and last Monday, Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, very ironic, very prophetic, that was the anniversary of the 43rd year when I became a lawyer, inducted into the bar. And I can tell you that the legal profession, from my experience, is the most dishonest and corrupt profession in the United States. There's not an ounce of integrity, whether it's the judges, whether it's the lawyers, whether it's some bar associations, such as the District of Columbia Bar, which is run by a bunch of leftist political hacks that want to eliminate anybody who doesn't agree with them, or for that matter, anything else. And we do not have a government. We have no government. And that's why, in addition to bringing citizens' grand juries, the American people need to seriously consider, as I've said in my podcast earlier in the week, declaring their own government. Let me paraphrase the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events, the sovereign breaks away from the people and no longer represents the people, under the laws of nature and nature's God, the people have a God-given right to alter or abolish that government and to form a new government by and for the people with certain inalienable rights in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. This, in addition to the Bible, are the two most moving documents ever written. They were godly inspired. I want you to read that before you go out and get my book, It Takes a Revolution. Forget the Scandal Industry, which you can get at Amazon.com, or go to freedomwatchusa.org. With a contribution of $50 or more, we'll send it to you for free. I'm not going to make money on this. This is my calling. Nobody else is saying what I'm saying. Nobody else has the guts to say what I'm saying. If I have to say that myself, I will. Because I firmly believe in my heart that we need to form a new government. And if we do that, people will come to us. The military would come to us as well. And they would say, you know what? You're right. So sometime next spring, I want to have a Third Continental Congress in Philadelphia, my birthplace, but also the birthplace of liberty. And I want to get experts from all walks of life. And I want to nominate people to be president, to be cabinet secretaries, to form a legislature, to actually have a real Supreme Court that isn't corrupt. Because unless we do that, we're going to perish. Now, I'll be right back with the second segment. And I want to talk to you about what just happened this morning in a very important case concerning Chief Justice Roy Moore. And we have a son on coming on right after that. Stay tuned. I'll be right back, because what I have to say is very, very, very important.
Dangerous.
Don't care. Use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
This really is not fun. I do this because I believe in it, and I want to save this country, play my role in saving it, and I hope that you'll join us and join our Justice League at Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org. Also, a new group which I formed with Sheriff Joe Arpaio called America's Sheriff, to protect the police and to allow them to defend you and to do their job. You can go to americascheriff.org, 2 S's in the middle, and join that and support that. About 2 years ago, Sacha Baron Cohen, this vile, low-class comedian, to use the term loosely, in a show called This Is America, or What Is America, whatever the heck it was, defrauded my client, Chief Justice Roy Moore, and his wife, Kayla. But he contacted them through intermediaries, through agents, and said that a company by the name of Yerushalayim TV, which was a fictitious, fraudulent company, we found out, wanted to give an award, that the state of Israel wanted to give that award during an interview in Washington, D.C., to Chief Justice Roy Moore for his support of Israel on the anniversary of Israel's independence. And of course, Chief Justice Moore was very, very proud to accept that. He's a big supporter of Israel. He's a Christian. He's an evangelical Christian. And frankly, evangelical Christians are bigger friends of Israel than certainly the Jewish left, and frankly, for that matter, most Jewish people. And you know that I'm a Jewish Christian. So he traveled to Washington, and he was going to go on the show to get his award, and they gave him a document, a release, to sign, which is normal when you go on a television show. And Judge Moore crossed out, because obviously he was very, very wary of anything at that point, that anything about sexual content could be discussed during the interview, because he had been smeared and destroyed by the Democrats and Doug Jones, who through fraud and libel and slander won the Senate election in 2017, the Chief Justice Moore. Well, he went on and he was interviewed. And on comes Sacha Baron Cohen dressed as a Mossad agent, Ehud Murad, that was his fictitious name. And during the course of an interview, he holds up a wand that he says was developed and invented by the Israeli Defense Forces, and it beeps that when you're in the presence of pedophiles, and it starts beeping. And Judge Moore becomes wary of that, and he says, "I'm leaving," which he did. The company behind Moore was Showtime, and Showtime is owned by CBS. So we then gave notice through my colleague in Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama, Melissa Isaac, a very brave female lawyer who stands up for the rights of men as well as others, that this would be defamation if it was published, if it went on TV. But they did anyway, because they want money. To make the long story short, we brought a lawsuit, a defamation lawsuit against Sacha Baron Cohen, Showtime, and CBS. Ultimately, it started in Washington. The judge in Washington, Thomas Hogan, a Republican establishment hack, didn't want to deal with it. He sent it to New York. There was a forum selection clause. It winds up in front of an African-American appointee of Barack Obama. Turns out to be an honest man and played it straight. And he said, "Larry, you can proceed with this case and you can take discovery of Sacha Baron Cohen and take what you need to do to prove your claims." Well, recently, the case was reassigned to a Trump-appointed judge by the name of Cronin, John Cronin. And Cronin is doing everything he can now to deny Chief Justice Roy Moore his rights, cutting back on discovery. I don't want to get into it. We don't have enough time. But it tells you something, is that even a Trump-appointed judge, and I talk about this in my book, it takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry. The president doesn't know who he appointed. They were appointed at the recommendation of sleazy Republican lobbyists. And we can see that even the justices of the Supreme Court that he's boasted and crowed about, Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Gorsuch, even they stabbed him in the back. And without protectors to protect the American people, such as the judiciary, we are left defenseless. And that's why we're in a revolution right now. And that's why I want you to go out and get my book and join that revolution. It's time to man the barricades. We're back to 1776. I'll be right back with the interview with Caleb Moore, and listen carefully what he has to say.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with Caleb Moore. He's the son of Chief Justice Roy Moore, who I'm very proud to have as a friend and as a client. Caleb's my friend as well. He's obviously a very integral member of the Moore family. He's an assistant director of the Foundation for Moral Law in Montgomery, Alabama. And he has his own political consulting firm called CSA Consulting, which does a lot in Alabama and elsewhere. And I brought him on because I want him to explain to our listeners what happened with regard to his dad's presidential race in 2017 against Doug Jones, which was stolen as well. It's really exemplary of what's been going on with our electoral system, how we've lost our ability to choose our representatives fairly and honestly. And of course, it's relevant to what the president experienced and what we experienced in a presidential election. Welcome to Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, Caleb, and tell us a little bit about what went on during your dad's campaign in terms of the fraud, in terms of the libel and slander and all the dirty tricks that the Democrats pulled.
Well, first off, thanks, Larry, for having me with you, and I'm honored to be able to speak on the topic. I'm glad that we're having this discussion again because free and fair elections in America is being undermined by the radical left, and they'll continue to do it until someone steps up to the plate and does something about it. And basically, here in Alabama, what we experienced in 2017 is happening again, and it's all the more apparent with Donald Trump's president race. Now, my dad actually ran for Senate in Alabama in 2017, and it was a very hotly contested race, as you know, Larry. It was the only race in the country. We had liberals from big donors and big PACs from all across the country come into the state of Alabama and spread a widespread misinformation campaign and everything else that came along with it, slander and malicious attacks on my father. But I believe what's worse than that is how they undermine the electorate in Alabama, and they did it through these voting machines that you're hearing about again. I have sworn affidavits, Larry, from mathematicians that ran stats on that race that showed at 1 in 15 billion chances that Doug Jones won that race legally. So these are sworn affidavits under oath. They give their analysis and the math of how they come up with this. But here's the thing. You would think that it would raise some eyebrows. You would think that a court or a judge who would receive a case like this would do his due diligence in looking into it. But instead, we were dismissed on the case that we filed on December 27th, 2017, alleging this fraud. Without no explanation, our case was dismissed. And I could tell you how they did it, Larry, but essentially, we lost the race by 22,000 votes. These machines, being new in the state, don't have any kind of legislative accountability or check to them, right? So these companies come in, they contract with the Secretary of State to count our votes, and then basically, when all said and done, they give you the result, and there's no accountability. They don't give you ballot images, which we filed for, requesting ballot images so that we could go and we could count the votes and we could check and make sure that what they were telling us is right. But obviously you have to have a court order to do that nowadays. So a lot went on in that election, and we're seeing a lot of the same things come now in President Trump's case.
Well, that's what's interesting here and really tragic, Caleb, is that the Republican establishment had notice of all of these things, beginning with your dad's race, even before that. But they took no action to try to remedy it, no real action. And it's happened again with regard to the presidential election. I believe it's going to happen in the Georgia elections for January 5th. Frankly, I'm going to make a prediction. I don't think that the Republican senators will prevail. And then we're going to be faced with an onslaught of ultra-leftist, socialist, communist ideology and legislation that's going to be foisted upon the American people. But the very fact that judges won't touch this is the basis of a book I recently wrote. I'm going to send you a copy of it and your dad and your mom. It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. And it was Thomas Jefferson who said that federal judges in particular, because they're unelected, unaccountable to the people, he was against them. He said state judges are bad enough, so to speak. Your dad was a very fine judge. Frankly, the only one I know at this point in time who really had the courage to stand up for anything. And I'm not exaggerating, and we'll get to that. But that they would turn into despots and tyrants because they were unaccountable. And then he predicted that every 20 years or so, we would again have to shed the blood of patriots and tyrants. and added, what's a few thousand dead to preserve the tree of liberty? Now, he didn't want to see violence. Neither do I, neither do you, neither does your dad and your mom. But when you can't even find out who won the election by being able to verify what these companies are doing, and of course, Dominion's been alleged by Sidney Powell and others to be linked to Hugo Chavez in Venezuela and other ultra-leftist interests, then we are in a revolutionary mode. And these judges were put there to protect us. And I'm going to add one other thing and then turn it back to you, because I want to talk about the person who was elected, Doug Jones, who very well will likely become the next Attorney General, God forbid. But when you can't challenge anything in court, what are you to do? Now, I remember I brought a case when the issue arose as to whether Obama had a birth certificate that was real, whether it was genuine or not. And there was a lot of forensic analysis that said that it wasn't, that said it was fraudulent. For one, in 1961, when Obama was born, the term African American had not been coined yet. It had not been used. And then there were other things on that image that appeared on the website after Trump, dared Obama to reveal something. He didn't reveal it. They just put an image on the website that showed that it was a fraudulent birth certificate. And I filed a case for a presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party, I believe it was, in Alabama. And the case went up to the Supreme Court. And your dad was the only one who would issue a ruling of all those judges, and there was a panel of judges, that you actually had to present your real birth certificate to qualify. And he didn't limit that to Obama. That applied to everybody. And that makes sense. And in many states, you don't even have to show your ID to vote. In fact, in California, apparently it's illegal to even show your ID. So, I wanted to get your take on that, because this election was stolen. And I believe that the American people, at least 50% of them, are not going to sit this taking down. And I'm afraid that Jefferson's prophecy will come to pass. Ultimately, if the president doesn't step in now and invoke the Insurrection Act, because now he's exhausted all his judicial remedies, cowardly judges, his own appointees stabbed him in the back on the Supreme Court with the case in Texas, which is typical. Their establishment, they protect themselves. And the likelihood here of a revolution, as Jefferson predicted, is getting increasingly close to possibly happening. So give me your take on that. And also on Doug Jones, because you know a lot about him. I mean, he smeared your dad, viciously, and we have lawsuits pending in that regard. And I was busy just last Friday on a case that we brought against Sacha Baron Cohen for defaming your dad as well, and also inflicting emotional distress on your mom, who was with him at the time that he was interviewed by Sacha Baron Cohen with these false claims of pedophilia and sexual abuse and all kinds of other things that they made up and pulled out of the hat. So anyway, let me hear what you have to say on this, because this is my take. I mean, I know I have a particular point of view, but I want to get yours.
Well, I'll tell you, Larry, you hit it head on with the judiciary. These judges are completely spineless. They're controlled. And where are you supposed to go when you have these election challenges, valid election challenges, and you hear the other side say, oh, well, they bring no evidence. They have no evidence. Well, I think it's very clear and concise when you have mathematicians and nonpartisan people coming together saying, look, something's got to be looked into. Something has to be done. But yet they continue with the same old dismiss and move on. And so I do think we're headed for a revolution and maybe a secession. If something's not done about election integrity and there's not new laws put into place to provide some accountability for the people.
Yeah, we need judges like your dad that have courage.
Well, and you're right. These judges are not elected by the people of Alabama or, by the people. These federal judges, they're put there. They're put into place for an agenda that's specific to them. And they know this, and my dad knows this, and that's why he was such a good judge, is because he stood up to the corruption in our courts and in the judiciary. And, I'll tell you one thing about Doug Jones is Republicans are going to have a big problem because what the Democrats will do, and with these races in Georgia, look, we're headed for the Democrats have unprecedented power in this country. And do you think they won't put someone like Doug Jones, who is as far left as any of them, in the Attorney General's office and weaponize our courts and weaponize our judicial process? They will. And that's why you see people, or you see Doug Jones at the top of Biden's list for potential nominees, is because he knows what Doug Jones will do. He'll follow suit. He'll do what he's told. And, I think Doug Jones is about as corrupt as they come, Larry. He obviously lacks any sense of moral aptitude. When you go after a man who's been in office for 40 years, stood for God for 40 years, never had one allegation brought against him of sexual conduct or anything in all of this time, but you spend millions of dollars to ruin the man, to allege false information, which I know you're aware of, and we're pursuing this in the courts as well, and we'll see where that goes. But when you do these things, you have no sense of morality. And, do we want somebody like that leading our judiciary in Washington? I don't think so. And it's only going to get worse. Now, I'm going to be surprised if, when Biden holds his inauguration, we're in uncertain times. There's no telling what's going to happen, because if something's not done about this election, then you're right. We are headed for a revolution.
Yeah, I think we're in one already, Caleb. That's pretty apparent. In fact, just to go back a little bit, when I did file the cases challenging Obama's birth certificate in Florida, that's my home state, the judges wouldn't even write an opinion. Dismissed. No explanation. Your dad wrote one. But as far as Doug Jones and the Justice Department, there's going to be a purge. There's going to be an inquisition. They're going to seek to eliminate anyone who opposes them. And they will use not just the Justice Department and the FBI, but the IRS and every government agency to do that. And that's why we need people like your dad, and we need people like you who will stand up to this. And I want to thank you for everything you've done. I'm very privileged to have you as my friend, and your dad and mom as my client. And I really cherish that. And we need more people like your dad. He's the best judge I've ever come up with in my career.
I just want to say thank you, okay, because there's also not very many attorneys like yourself that would come to the battle and that would run toward the fight to help the future of this country. And so it's people like you that matters in the courts as well, and we're doing everything we can on our end.
Thank you for joining us, and God bless you, and have a happy and Merry Christmas.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
This is the verdict, fellow patriots, ladies and gentlemen. We, the American people, have been left totally defenseless. We, the American people, are now under the rule of despots and tyrants, worse than even King George III in the days, months, and years leading up to 1776. King George III was not a socialist. King George III was not a communist. King George III was not a radical Muslim. King George III was not a member of the Marxian Jewish left. King George III was not a radical feminist or LGBTQ. King George III was not a radical black. King George III was not an atheist. But that is who's going to be inhabiting the earth in terms of the United States if President Biden becomes President Biden. and that evil witch, pathological liar, Kamala Harris, becomes the vice president. And it looks like that's going to happen. So we, the American people, now need to rise up. We need to take matters into our own legal and peaceful hands. No violence, no bloodshed, no assaults. We're not the radical left. We're not a bunch of Bolsheviks roaming the streets, looting, maiming, and killing. But we can do things peacefully and legally. And if we don't succeed, then there will be others, not us, who take matters into their own hands. We also need to exercise our Second Amendment rights. We need, frankly, to arm up, because these radical leftists will not stop at the doorstep of the White House of Biden and Harris. They want to take everything that you own. They want to divide everything. They want to subjugate you to, in effect, slavery by taxing you huge amounts. You know, the Islamic religion, if you go by the book, by the Quran, okay, that's all it is, a book. It's not, in my view, holy, as Obama used to call it, because in my view, Islam, if practiced the way it is in the Quran, is not a religion, it's a cult. Now, there are many good Muslims in the world. They've quit. They're no longer Muslims. They don't want to be part of it. I believe that Islam has been inhabited by the devil, and that's my honest belief. And the fact is that in Islam, you either kill the infidels or you enslave them and make them pay very high taxes. And that's, in fact, what's being advocated by all of these factions of the radical left. They want to take away your liberties. You can see what's been happening with regard to COVID-19. They're using that as an excuse to take total control over our lives. Even with these vaccines, assuming that they're effective and safe, which frankly I doubt, already there have been significant side effects of those who have been given that vaccine. But you're still going to have to wear the mask. This is going to be around for a very long time. And there are going to be copycats who also use biological warfare, as the Communist Chinese obviously did, to bring the United States down. And on top of that, you have these wolves, Communist China, Russia, who's just hacked all of our data in our so-called government, including our nuclear secrets. You've got Iran there. I'm sure they're collaborating with each other. You've got North Korea wanting to destroy the United States as the people now in charge of this country. Socialists, communists, people like Bernie Sanders, who wanted to do his honeymoon in Moscow and did take his honeymoon in Moscow. That's his Mecca. That's his homeland, not the United States. He doesn't respect this country. It's clear, and neither do the rest. So that is why I want you to go out and purchase my book. It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. I can't speak too clearly or too strongly to wake the American people up. No one else will say this. Certainly you won't hear it on Fox News. They won't be inviting me on Fox News. You won't hear it on Newsmax. They'll play it safe. When I used to write columns for Newsmax, 80% got censored. But now we need to give the American people the facts of life so we can rise up and do what we need to do, and that is save this country. So go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or go to Freedom Watch's website, make a contribution, and get the book and read it and digest it. And then I want to hear from you. I wrote a column in World Net Daily. I want to hear your suggestions. I want there to be feedback, because as Benjamin Franklin said, either we all hang together, or separately we will hang. And that's my message for today. So I want you to have a happy holiday period, a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, but you take it to heart, because if we don't act now, this republic is gone. God bless you. God bless your family. Remember that God helps those that help themselves. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Thank you for listening to me.
I enroll so I can get covered and stay covered, even after I get back on my feet.
Whatever your reason for needing health insurance, Nevada HealthLink is here for you. Enroll November 1st through January 15th at NevadaHealthLink.com.